Yo, what's going on, all my loyal subscribers? I'm taking a little break from fart reviews right now, just sort of like decompressing. Um, I mean, you know I'll be right back, but yeah, just decompressing a little bit from the farts. I thought I was gonna do a long form video today, and I wanted to discuss some stuff that I've been seeing because I spend a lot of time consuming media on my shitty Chinese smartphone. Thank you for that, China. So. Um, and you know, everybody's talking about the war in Iran right now, right? And I saw this morning it was too good to not comment upon it. That Trump is actually straight up frame mugging Iran on Twitter, throwing their own shit in their face, basically. And I love to see it. Like, people have criticized me for liking Trump, both, people with TDS, as they call it, the Trump derangement syndrome, but also people with, reasonably philosophically grounded and politically informed opinions on foreign policy matters. So, I'm not trying to be that much of a polemicist when it comes to disagreements. But I was early in the meme war, to say the least. Especially when Trump first came on the scene before the 2016 glory days. Anyways, we might be landing on new glory days, but I wanted to address this idea of these Middle East conflicts, right? They seem to be happening. They seem to always be happening. What's the deal? Is it about, is it Israel's nefarious plan to take over more useless desert wastelands? Or is it the US are gonna take all the oil? The US does not have a national oil company. Alright? Just to put that out there. They like the statement, the US are gonna take all the oil, is completely asinine. Alright, they're not gonna go there and fucking, what are you gonna do, use the military to run the drills? No, oil is drilled mostly by international companies, some of which are partially state owned, like Equinor, which comes from my country of Norway, and we have a shit ton of windfall revenue come out of our oil industry. We're basically like a northern Saudi Arabia without all the weird gay Muslim stuff. It's pretty gay, but not to dick on the gays in this video. And we have a bunch of Muslims now as well. Probably not as much as other countries, but that's for a different subject. Anyways, the point is that, war for oil. War for oil. This was a slogan I heard a lot back when I was like 14 years old. Grew up watching. I'm just gonna light up a smoke because this is gonna be your favorite Hobo Fart Maxer's new segment, which is called a smokecast, where I rant about a topic called smoking ciggies. So I'm a young sheep, right? I'm born in 1996. Okay. Yeah, you're gonna dox me. His address is a pile of shit. Anyways, I wasn't there for Bush Senior, but I was there for Bush Junior when I was a tiny little boy. At the turn of the millennium. And then, of course, 9/11, Afghanistan. And later I've also studied international politics and military strategy and stuff like that. go more into depth about that in another video. But if I try to cover too many topics, I'm gonna go insane. And so everybody was saying, you know, George W.'s Hitler. It's war for oil. War for oil. And like, yeah, it is a war for oil. You know, it was the same in World War II. It was the same in World War I. You know, as soon as we started learning how to make cars and shit, like, resources play a part in conflict. All right, that's, you know, like, you know, the most obvious example that comes to the front of my mind is like, you look at Hitler's. Do I have to censor that for the algorithm? Why do I have to censor that for it? Leave a comment below why people are like censoring the most arbitrary stuff. Anyways, when Mustache Man decided to take a walk on the wild side in Operation Barbarossa, where he took a walk on the wild side to the Soviet Union, who had previously, through the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, agreed to split Poland in half. I mean, share Poland. You know, they went to town, but the thing is that he had two options. Two mustache men pitted against each other. And, you know, I don't know if it's kosher for historians to kind of like say that, yeah, it can be counted as a preemptive strike, because even though there were tensions between Trotskyist and Stalinist ideals in terms of expansion, or as in spreading the revolution versus building industrial base at home, it looked like, at least from the German perspective at the time, you gotta know that there's always uncertainty in these matters, that an invasion was building, and Mustache Man was like, sooner rather than later, right? His classical fashion, you know, they had sort of gotten high on their own supply in terms of the momentum doctrine, the so-called blitzkrieg, seeing how it worked in France, you know, which they had fought 100 years before with much more difficulty than they could have expected in was it 1940 they went there, or was that also in 1939? Like, they hit the both sides with very, very much efficiency, right? German efficiency. Anyways, Germany does not have that much oil, all right? They have coal, but coal is not very good to use for fuel for elaborately designed tanks. And the Soviets, they had oil. They were down in Azerbaijan, which at the time was a part of the Soviet Union, the Azeri SSR. And, you know, they had it in Chechnya as well. That's why Chechnya wasn't taken out as a sovereign country from the Russian Federation when it dissolved in the 90s, which resulted in 2 wars. And so, yeah, in the Caucasus region there's oil near the Caspian Sea, just like there's oil in Iran. And so the Germans were faced with then a conundrum. What do? Do we go march straight to the Kremlin and put Joseph Stalin's head on a stick and get the people to do the cool salutes? Heidi, ooh. Or do we try to cripple their war machine sooner rather than later, so that we can get a clean military defeat with any chance of insurrection being annihilated by taking their oil. Because they had already experienced, and as they were progressing through the Eastern Europe, especially in areas like Serbia, because they ended up going into Greece and stuff, partially due to stuff that had to do with the Italians and naval control in the Mediterranean, because the Brits held Gibraltar and then North Africa and all that. That should probably be in a different video. Where was I? Yeah, so he tried to do both. Mustache Man. He wanted to do both. And as a result, he got very far but achieved none. And because of this alliance, this unlikely alliance between the man of steel, Joseph Stalin, who didn't really have that much steel, but he had a bunch of oil, and Roosevelt, the gentleman and investor of the prosperous nation that had defied all odds and manifested destiny and become a Chicago World Fair beacon of Western civilization and capitalist ideals, formed. Norway played a crucial part in this because we were shipping a lot of this steel that came out of the US over the Arctic into Russia, to Murmansk, so that they could build their overwhelming supply of T-34 tanks primarily, and also other stuff, right? Which is what helped turn the tide of the war. But if you've ever heard about Stalingrad, which is now known as Volgograd, and that's what it was known as because it's on the river Volga. Ironically enough, there was a huge community of Germans living in the Volga area for centuries before the war, and they were driven out and stuff. Blah blah. But it's way south of Moscow, right? So they had to pass through Stalingrad in order to try to get to Baku, which is Azerbaijan. And talk about supply line. Like, these are massive distances. And every entry-level history geek knows that was Napoleon's Achilles heel as well when he went for the Russian Bear, and back then it was all horse and carriage. Now it's a fun fact that because of this oil shortage, a lot of the German army was run by horses. They had the most horse and carriage army of all the different powers fighting in this war. But this was also due to the fact that they chose to concentrate their resources on this idea of the highly mechanized spearhead, where you have an incredibly rapidly advancing front unit that is heavily mechanized, and then you have the rest of the boys trying to catch up, and they were pumping them full of meth and shit. And Iran was actually occupied by the British precisely because of this oil thing, which is why the Mediterranean became key strategically. And we talk about the Straits of Hormuz today, but now I forget. Like, Istanbul is generally considered one of the most strategically, if not the most strategically important important cities in the world because it's adjacent to the Gallipoli fucking, what's that strait called again? The fuck it. I'll put it in a pinned comment. No, leave a comment down below if you can remember the name of that strait now, because it's just fucking flying out of my head. Because we got to get to the Straits of Hormuz and why they're important. All right, because people who object to the world will always use some sort of reductionist argument, right? Reductionist argument. What do I mean by that? I mean, like, they'll be like, well, it's just for oil. People are dying just for oil. Or it's just because Israel. Now, obviously Israel has a vested interest in lobbying for the United States to have a strong defense posture, and then thus them having a deterrent effect on the Islamic powers. But at the same time, and the Greater Israel Project may or may not be, first of all, a thing. I mean, I'm sure they've thought of it. But second of all, not really possible to do without slipping on their own banana peels, because now they're kind of like, the Saudis are like, fuck it, we'll do business with the Jews, we don't care. we just want fancy schmancy futurist cities. And of course I don't really like the Gaza West Bank stuff, and I also think they've kind of like facilitated the what some people call the Muslim invasion of Europe. I think there are more nuances to that, because I've seen the increase of Muslims in Western Europe, and there are places where it feels more like an invasion than others. Just leave it at that. Anyways, because the US won World War II, or the Allies, after that was a series of negotiating processes, etc., such as after World War I, when the State of Israel was created with the Balfour Declaration, etc., as a result of the Sykes-Picot deal, when the French still had a say in the matter. There was a series of negotiations in order to set up a global system of rules-based interactions in order to prevent a world war from happening again. And this sort of there are a few important events, right? So you have the establishment of the UN as we know it today. That's why we have a Security Council with 5 powers who have veto right and are allowed to have nuclear weapons, seeing as the nuclear age started at the end of World War II. And a system of international currency tethering that culminates in the US dollar through the Bretton Woods agreements, which may have been a big factor in why the Soviets were so stubborn in their fight to build Soviet socialism, because they realized that by joining that, they would concede that capitalism is better at creating wealth than socialism. Now, there was a lot of foul play during the Cold War, but everybody got fucked, really. However, this is where China comes into the picture, right? Because Bretton Woods gets signed, and now the US dollar is the underpinning currency for all other currencies in the world, right? So the Japanese yen, the Norwegian krona, the lira before the euro became a thing, etc., etc. Anything really, because of its size. The people who were outsiders in like the bloc, as they call it, they would still have to rely on this system in order for them to be able to sell their stuff, so that they could have currency. Currency with value. All right, you got to remember that World War II, a huge part of why it started was this hyperinflation crisis in Germany, right? As well as competition over regional hegemony, and just plain old grudges, right? But having liquidity, having access to currency is a big part of how you have industry, how you have trains, planes, cars, boats, dildos, all right, fucking video games. Like, it's all made out of some type of energy and some type of raw material coming together and paid for by money. Thus, there is a price on money. Money itself has a price, like gold has a price. And that was the thing, back in the day, in the Middle Ages, it was all about the gold. But even then, they were devaluing the currency. Some places switched to silver because it was more abundant. So currency itself is subjected to supply and demand. That's why interest rates exist, because time is money and money is time. And so, right now, the last few years, we've been experiencing what people call a cost of living crisis, but larger amounts of inflation than we've been used to in the happy 21st century. Although 2008 was a pretty bad hit, but this appears to actually be worse. But time will tell. Where's I going with this? Yeah, so again, and then people will be like, reductionist argument, right? Oh, inflation is just stealing value from labor and putting it into capital, or taking money from the people and putting it into the lending class, which ironically dovetails the Nazis and the communists. But I wonder why they hated each other so much. Leave a comment down below. Maybe it's that pesky time again. If anyone's read Martin Heidegger. That's a different subject though. But anyways, Trump doesn't need the Israel lobby to realize that even though it's nice with a little oil price rise now and then, so you can pump and dump the high and low conjunctures of the market if you're smart and ahead of the curve, like a Warren Buffett or a George Soros, it's not sustainable in the long run for it to take off to the moon like that, because it takes energy to make energy, and it takes energy to make all the other shit that we use, like PlayStations and sex dolls and and magic markers, glass pieces to smoking weed, or just fuel for trucks to move those glass pieces for you to smoke your weed to the head shop. So like every chain of production is intrinsically linked to oil. Obviously also like natural gas and other things like hydropower, but even that, like you're not going to have the concrete to build out a river for hydropower without oil itself already being present. And so this is why war for oil. But the thing is that, and inflation is, obviously Trump has to put on a front that we're beating inflation, it's going great, but it's still happening faster than it should do. And footnote on that, this gentleman's agreement on inflation being acceptable at around 2% comes from the Glorious Revolution in England, where the Bank of England was formed and central banking was created, which was instrumental in creating them, in making their global hegemony possible. This was following on from the beheading of King Charles, which was linked to conflicts between monarchists and parliamentarians, and also partially Catholics and Protestants. I mean, there's a whole doozy there as well. Extremely important. It's called the Glorious Revolution. It's probably way more impactful even than the French Revolution in terms of understanding the West. But I think it's way less known about by the average armchair historian, or even, especially people who just shriek in the streets and say history this, history that. Whenever it suits them, without even knowing any of the details, let alone the basic gist of it. Now, the Straits of Hormuz is a global choke point for energy flows. But like Trump said, USA is pretty much energy independent. They have a bunch of oil themselves, and it's interesting though, because the Straits of Hormuz are only important insofar as the Suez Canal stays open, and that's Egypt. And so that might make some more sense of why the Americans are still in bed with the Israelis, even though we all know that Jewish people are cringe as fuck. But there was an invasion of Egypt in the 1950s by the British and the French combined to stop their new leader Nasser from nationalizing the Suez Canal, in the same way that now Iran are taxing the Straits of Hormuz. And this comes back to interest, all right? Their ideology, revolutionary Islam, is linked especially to the riba, and that's why they hate the Jews so much. And the riba is like they're not allowed to have interest on their money. Of course they're gonna do anyways, because nobody is outside of time. But that means they can't open themselves up to any sort of outside business. That means they can't have any innovation or flourishing of ideas. It marries them to a constant role of being arms dealers, drug dealers, black market dealers, facilitators of illicit trade, and stuff like that, because they have basically said, take your Bretton Woods agreement and shove it, And I'm not trying to sit here and be like some American internet conservative guy and be like, capitalism is the best ever, blah blah blah. I know that the Fed is a bit corrupt, and we certainly are in this mess because of somebody probably having a little bit too much champagne behind the fucking steering wheel of the world economy over there in Yankee land. So if Trump, if you're listening, fucking stay on the ball, man. Not that I'm one to talk, I drink all day. But you know what I mean, like his logic, his critique of Biden, I think, is completely correct. If you inflate stuff like competence, if you turn politics into some sort of talking about nonsense issues and try to deny that anything has essence and stuff like that, you're gonna inflate the currency, and then suddenly you don't have fucking money for baby formula, right? It's not even rocket science. It's like, it's high school econ really, but even like undergraduate level, and like everybody has a fucking BA now, so what's people's fucking excuse, at least people who fucking talk into cameras like vain idiots like myself. But so Trump has a strategic imperative not only for the United States but for the entire world, to make sure that the Straits of Hormuz stay stable, stay a safe zone, a safe shipping lane. And what he does now, I'm very positive about, because not only does he speak the language that these Islamists speak, he also gives the orders for decisive operations. He's not walking around the porridge. He's not sticking his toes in the pool. And it doesn't even appear that he's trying to showcase the new gun. He's straight up taking the fight to where it matters. And dollar hyperinflation would be bad for America, certainly. I mean, hyperinflation, that's a deep crisis. But dollar hyperinflation would not just take Europe down with it. It would take the whole world down with it. All right, we're talking like, if it hit Weimar Republic level inflation, the whole world's going post-apocalypse mode in like 4 days. All right, and this is the weight of the responsibility that the US has taken upon themselves by being the world's tethering currency, or the petrodollar, as they used to talk about back before 2008. And again, the reductionist counter-argument, right? Oh, they just want to control everything. No other country in the world wants this job. Why couldn't China do? China does not want it. Their whole economy is dependent on the petrodollar. All right, Eurozone doesn't want it. Nobody wants it. All right, it takes a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of risk taking with a lot of chips on the table. And that's why they have such a global military presence. That's why the military industrial complex is a thing. And that's why war for oil matters. So that you can go to school and get a fucking latte. So yeah. That's my smokecast, guys. Guys, if you have a smoke, light it up, motherfucker. I'm about to light mine up again with the fucking wind. Ah, that's delicious. Alright. Let me know what you think about my take down in the comments. And, you know, send me some nudes or something. I don't know. I just need to get this off my chest. I might do more of these. Alright, peace.